Enterprise was supposed to be a fresh start, a return to the roots that made the franchise iconic. Instead, it became the gamble that broke Star Trek. After nearly 15 years of non-stop series, the brand was everywhere and showing cracks. The studio wanted another hit, fast. But instead of moving forward, they looked back, launching a prequel at the exact moment fans were ready for something new. It was a bold risk that ended up shutting down Star Trek on television for more than a decade. Enterprise debuted in 2001, inheriting a franchise at its peak and on the verge of exhaustion. The Next Generation had turned it into prestige TV, Deep Space Nine pushed it into moral gray territory, and Voyager sent it even further into the unknown. There had never been more Star Trek on television, or more pressure to keep it alive. Producers Rick Berman and Brannon Braga were handed the impossible task of reinventing something with decades of mythology behind it. Their pitch was simple, but risky. Tell the story of how it all began. Before Kirk, before the Federation, before Starfleet even had rules or translators. Could Star Trek move backward and still feel like the future? By the time Voyager was wrapping up, even the producers were burned out. Rick Berman had been steering Star Trek for more than a decade, and later admitted he'd argued the franchise needed a rest. But UPN, with Paramount's backing, pushed ahead with a new series anyway. Brannon Braga had just finished Voyager and admitted he was exhausted, but agreed to return one last time to help launch Enterprise. Their concept clashed with what Paramount thought Star Trek should be. The studio wanted something sleek and futuristic. Berman and Braga pitched something raw and human. Executives doubted that a story set before Kirk and Picard could still feel like Star Trek, but Berman and Braga were chasing authenticity, not nostalgia. The earlier design reflected that divide. The ship looked more industrial, and the uniforms more like NASA flight suits than sleek starship attire. Production designer Herman Zimmerman later said the mandate was NASA, not Starfleet. Practical, industrial, and human. Enterprise wasn't meant to look advanced. It was meant to look believable. Casting the right people was everything. Berman and Braga wanted a captain unlike any who'd come before. Someone less sure of himself, more wide-eyed, and genuinely amazed by what he saw. Captain Archer wasn't meant to stride onto the bridge like he'd seen it all. He was supposed to still be figuring it out. From the start, there was only one name seriously considered for the role: Scott Bakula.
From what the Admiral tells me, Ambassador Saval will use this to convince Starfleet that we need another 10 or 20 years before we try this again.
But for a while, it looked like they might lose him. He was reportedly close to signing a CBS comedy pilot, and his Enterprise deal didn't close until just 3 days before production began. The cast and crew didn't even meet him until the table read. When they did, it clicked instantly. Bakula brought that perfect balance of curiosity and quiet authority. A captain who felt human, not mythic. Finding T'Pol proved to be more difficult. The role was critical. She had to be a Vulcan who could hold her own among humans, but still have on-screen presence and sex appeal. The studio went through numerous actresses before finding Jolene Blalock.
Only because they believe we're human. If they discovered the truth, do you think they'd be so compassionate?
Brannon Braga later said that casting a beautiful woman in a Star Trek show was always challenging because she not only had to be attractive and talented, but possessed the wisdom of someone much older. Blalock fit that description, but she also had the confidence to push back when she disagreed. She'd grown up watching Star Trek and was openly skeptical of Berman and Braga's scripts, later calling some of them softcore scenes in space. Early on, she fought to make T'Pol more authentically Vulcan, pushing back against episodes that wrote her as overly emotional. Connor Trinneer's road to Enterprise wasn't as painless. He went through multiple callbacks and long silences from Paramount, later calling it the toughest audition process I'd ever been through. But from the producer's side, it was an easy choice. Rick Berman said Trenier was born to play Trip Tucker. The chemistry between him, Bakula, and Blaylock became the emotional core of the show.
An alien is left on Earth in the 1950s, lives through 30 presidents, travels the world, and no one notices him? And what happened when he finally kicked the bucket?
Dominic Keating first met Rick Berman when he auditioned for a role on Voyager. During the meeting, Berman told him he'd already created a character named Malcolm for a new series that was still a year or more away from production, and didn't want to waste him on a show that was ending. Keating didn't get the Voyager role, but when Enterprise came along, he stepped into that very part, Lieutenant Malcolm Reed.
Ask for plasma coils, and they send me a case of valve sealant. There's no chance I can have these weapons online in 3 days.
We're just taking a sick man back to his homeworld. Why do we need weapons?
Didn't you read the profile report on these Klingons?
The producers were looking for a young black actor, and Anthony Montgomery practically talked himself into the role of Ensign Travis Mayweather. He'd already auditioned twice for Voyager and made enough of an impression to be invited back when Enterprise began casting. This time, he nailed it.
They call this a proper meal? Should save it for Commander Tucker. Make a good valve sealant.
Casting continued with the search for an Asian actor to play the communications officer, Ensign Hoshi Sato, a linguistics prodigy who would serve as a bridge to the franchise's future Uhura. The role called for someone who could be both vulnerable and confident, afraid and fearless all at once. Linda Park nailed it. She later said she modeled Hoshi's fear and curiosity after herself. A fan suddenly dropped into Starfleet.
Root leaf lettuce for your slugs, Vulcan sandworms for the bat, and angel hair pasta for the ship's physician.
And finally, John Billingsley joined the cast as Dr. Phlox, bringing a warmth and eccentricity that humanized the show when the scripts turned cold.
If that someone or something has abducted Ensign Mayweather and left this facsimile in his place.
There's a funny story about his audition. He'd been told to come in with a slight alien accent, whatever that was supposed to mean. Thinking Phlox might come from a planet of birds, Billingsley decided to actually squawk a few times during the read. After he got the part, he wasn't entirely sure if the squawking helped or if they just decided to overlook it. On his second day on set, he ran through a scene with the director and threw in another little squawk. "What the hell was that?" the director snapped. Billingsley hesitated and asked, "Oh, so, we're not doing the squawking?" "Yeah, that's right," came the reply. Behind the laughter, though, the atmosphere reflected what Burma and Braga were feeling. Enterprise was still trying to find its identity, and the people making it were already running on fumes. When Enterprise premiered, the numbers looked good. An estimated 12.5 million people tuned in. But within weeks, something fell off. The optimism that usually surrounded a new Star Trek show wasn't there. Fans weren't debating favorite characters or new technologies. They were arguing over what Enterprise was trying to be. Part of the backlash came from the tone. After Deep Space Nine's political complexity and Voyager's long journey home, Enterprise felt stripped down, deliberately primitive. Some fans liked that. Others saw it as regression. For viewers used to 21st century polish, watching humans stumble through first contact felt like a downgrade. And then there was the theme song, Where My Heart Will Take Me, a reworked version of Face of the Heart, the soft rock ballad UPN chose to open the show. Berman opposed using a pop ballad as a theme, but UPN insisted. He was ultimately overruled. It became an instant lightning rod, proof to many fans that Star Trek was chasing mainstream appeal instead of leading it. UPN promoted Enterprise as its flagship show, but scheduled and marketed it like a conventional network drama, not a legacy franchise. Executives pushed for flashier visuals, broader stories, and, infamously, more skin. The decontamination scenes came from UPN's push for sexier moments to appeal to younger male viewers, an idea that producers approved reluctantly. It might have lured casual viewers, but it alienated the loyal base that kept Star Trek alive for decades. By the end of Season 2, Enterprise had lost nearly half its premiere audience. Fatigue had set in behind the scenes, and UPN was growing impatient. The network pushed for more action and a stronger serialized hook, prompting the writers to expand the little-used temporal Cold War storyline from the pilot into a major arc. Brannon Braga later called it a compromise that never really worked. The series kept its episodic structure at a time when television was shifting toward long-form storytelling. Enterprise launched 2 weeks after 9/11, into a TV landscape suddenly obsessed with threat and retaliation. Stories about exploration fell out of step. For Season 3, UPN wanted a serialized action arc.
They went to a lot of trouble to let you go. Do you really think they'll attack us again?
They're not exactly unified. The reptilians came after us on their own. They might decide to finish what they started.
We've run out of moons to hide behind.
The writers answered with the Xindi storyline, a full-season revenge mission that bent Starfleet's ideals because that's what the culture and the network demanded. That season, UPN insisted on adding Star Trek back into the title and introduced a harder-edged remix of the opening theme. It was more than a new theme, it was a declaration. The melody was still hopeful, but now it strained against the noise. Enterprise was no longer chasing wonder, it was bracing for impact. The optimism of early Starfleet was gone, replaced by tension and doubt. Even the opening credits felt heavier, a show trying to carry the weight of a changed world. Behind the scenes, the pressure was relentless. Rick Berman and Brannon Braga were burned out, and it showed. The cast felt it too. Jolene Blalock criticized the tone-deaf writing, especially the early sexed-up material that reduced a Vulcan science officer to a ratings prop. Scott Bakula stayed diplomatic, but later admitted the constant network interference was draining. By the end of Season 3, morale had fractured. The network wanted spectacle, the writers wanted soul, and neither side was winning. By Season 4, everyone could feel the end was near. Berman stepped back, and Manny Coto took over, a fan who understood that Star Trek needed purpose, not just nostalgia. He tightened the show into 2 and 3 episode arcs that connected Star Trek history. The Vulcans in Surak, the Klingon forehead mystery, the augments, even a full Mirror Universe run. Under Manny Coto's leadership, the tone behind the scenes improved. Cast members later said scripts came in on time and production felt more organized. Morale finally lifted. It was the show's creative peak, arriving just as the network itself began to fall apart. Outside the soundstage, UPN was collapsing. Affiliate coverage was shrinking, ad revenue was drying up, and the network was hemorrhaging money. Even as critics finally praised Enterprise for finding its footing, the network's days were numbered.
Food on this ship isn't fit for animals. That mangy pet of yours would probably taste better. You can either take me home or find a new chef. It's that simple. Oh, something else? I want new quarters.
Within a year of the show's cancellation, CBS and Warner Brothers announced they would merge UPN and the WB to form the CW, making Enterprise's return impossible. In early 2005, the decision came down. Season 4 would be the last. The cast learned the news through calls from their agents and studio representatives just before the public announcement. Scott Bakula later said the cancellation felt inevitable, not because of the show's quality, but because the studio no longer had room for it. Fans launched a campaign called Trek United and pledged millions in hopes of funding a 5th season. Paramount thanked them, but declined. The finale that followed should have been a celebration. Instead, it felt like an afterthought. These Are the Voyages was billed as a love letter to all of Star Trek, but played more like a eulogy delivered by the wrong people. Instead of giving the Enterprise crew their own ending, the story was framed as a next-generation holodeck simulation, with Riker and Troy observing Archer's final mission like museum curators. It was meant as a tribute, but fans saw it as a hijacking. Jolene Blaylock called the episode appalling. She wasn't alone.
And now, Trip is dead, and I have to give a speech about how worthwhile it's all been.
Trip would be the first to say it was worthwhile.
Bakula later said the cast felt blindsided, thinking they were building toward a deeper, more personal finale before the studio pulled the rug out. Even Brannon Braga, who co-wrote it, admitted years later that it didn't land. When the credits rolled in 2005, it marked more than the end of a series. It ended Star Trek on television. For the first time in 18 years, there was no Star Trek in production. The franchise that had once dominated science fiction was suddenly gone, and few believed it would stay away for long. But it did, for 12 years. The next Trek series wouldn't arrive until Discovery in 2017. Enterprise was also a victim of where it lived. UPN was a young, unsteady network with limited reach and no clear identity, the wrong home for a show carrying decades of Star Trek legacy. Had it aired on a stronger platform, one that could have marketed and supported it like The Next Generation or Voyager, it might have endured long enough to evolve into what it was meant to be. Over time, though, Enterprise found a second life. Streaming gave it room to breathe. New viewers discovered it without the baggage of weekly expectations, and longtime fans began to see what it had really tried to do, not what they wanted it to be. They saw the ambition buried under network meddling, the groundwork it laid for serialized storytelling, and the flawed, human optimism at its core. Today, Enterprise sits between eras, the last gasp of the Berman years and a rough blueprint for modern serialized Star Trek. It stumbled, but it dared to show something rare. Even in the 22nd century, humanity was still figuring itself out.